The diplomatic meeting room hummed with tension as representatives from 12 different alien species gathered around the massive crystal table. Commander Thane adjusted his ceremonial armor and glanced at the holographic display showing Earth's surface. The blue and green planet looked deceptively peaceful from space, but the data streaming across his tablet told a different story entirely. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Galactic Council," Thane began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had surveyed over 300 worlds, "I present to you the most dangerous inhabited planet we have ever discovered." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Vorthon delegate clicked her mandibles nervously, while the crystalline Nexari representative dimmed with concern. Even the usually confident Altarian ambassador shifted uncomfortably in his adaptive chair. "Earth's gravitational field is nearly twice the standard that most civilized species consider safe," Thane continued, manipulating the hologram to show cross-sections of the planet's structure. "The atmospheric composition includes a highly reactive gas called oxygen that would be toxic to over 60% of known life forms. Their weather systems generate electrical storms with enough energy to power a small starship." The Keltheran observer raised one of her 6 arms. "Commander, surely you exaggerate. No intelligent species could evolve under such conditions." "I thought the same thing," Thane replied, switching the display to show footage of human cities. "But look at this. They have built massive structures that stretch hundreds of meters into their turbulent atmosphere. They travel across their world's surface at speeds that would be fatal to most species if they crashed. And perhaps most shocking of all, they voluntarily expose themselves to their star's radiation for recreational purposes." The room fell silent as images of humans sunbathing on beaches filled the air above the table. To most of the assembled aliens, it looked like a form of slow suicide. "The humans appear to be trapped on their death world," Thane explained. "Their bodies require constant protection from their own environment. They wear artificial coverings to regulate temperature, need frequent hydration to prevent their biological systems from failing, and must consume nutrients almost constantly to maintain their fragile energy balance." Dr. Yilan, the Council's chief xenobiologist, leaned forward with interest. "What is their average lifespan under these harsh conditions?" "Remarkably, they survive for approximately 80 of their local years," Thane said. "Though I suspect this is only possible because they spend most of their time hiding inside protective shelters. When they venture outside, they require additional clothing, tools, and often vehicles to shield them from their environment." The Altarian ambassador looked puzzled. "If they are so fragile, how did they develop technology advanced enough for us to detect their radio signals?" Thane had wondered about that himself. "Their desperation seems to drive rapid technological development. Out of necessity, they have created remarkably sophisticated tools to compensate for their biological limitations. However, their technology appears crude and dangerous by our standards. They propel their vehicles using controlled explosions, power their cities by burning fossil fuels that poison their atmosphere, and their space exploration efforts are so primitive that they still use chemical rockets." He switched to footage of a human space shuttle launch. The assembled aliens watched in horrified fascination as the massive machine lifted off in a column of fire and smoke that looked more like a weapon than a transportation device. "They have managed to send a few representatives beyond their atmosphere," Thane continued, "but only while wearing bulky life support systems. Even then, their missions are brief and extremely limited in scope. It's clear they are not naturally suited for space travel." The Vorthan delegate made a chittering sound that indicated deep concern. "Commander, what is your recommendation for first contact with this species?" Thane had given this considerable thought. The Galactic Council had protocols for integrating primitive species, but humanity presented unique challenges. "I recommend extreme caution. While the humans appear to be intelligent and potentially peaceful, their adaptation to such a hostile environment may have made them inherently aggressive or unstable." He brought up images of human cities at night, blazing with artificial light. Notice how they illuminate their settlements as if preparing for constant warfare. They have divided their planet into competing territorial units and maintain large, standing armies equipped with weapons capable of devastating their own world. Their fragility may actually make them more dangerous, he continued. Desperate creatures often resort to violence when threatened. Given their harsh environment, they have likely developed a survival mentality that could make peaceful contact difficult. Dr. Yilan studied the data with professional interest. Their biological limitations might actually work in our favor for integration purposes. If we can offer them refuge on more suitable worlds, they might be grateful enough to cooperate. That raises another concern, Thane said. Their bodies are so specifically adapted to their extreme environment that relocating them could be fatal. They might be permanently trapped on their death world, making them unsuitable for galactic civilization. The crystalline Nexari representative pulsed with a soft blue light, their species equivalent of raising a hand. Commander, have you observed any evidence of the humans attempting to expand beyond their world? Minimal and unsuccessful, Thane replied. They have managed to establish a small artificial habitat in orbit around their planet, but it houses fewer than a dozen individuals and requires constant supply missions from the surface. They have sent unmanned probes to nearby worlds, but these appear to be desperate attempts to find alternate habitats rather than true exploration. The room buzzed with discussion as the various species debated among themselves. The general consensus seemed to be that humanity represented a fascinating but ultimately tragic case of intelligence trapped by environmental limitations. My recommendation to the Council, Thane concluded, is that we classify humanity as a protected species requiring careful management. They should be approached slowly and cautiously, with extensive preparation for the possibility that they cannot survive outside their natural habitat. We must be prepared for the likelihood that integration into galactic society may be impossible for biological reasons. The Keltheran observer raised her arm again. Commander, when do you plan to initiate first contact? I have been assigned to monitor their development for another 6 months before making direct contact, Thane answered. This will allow us to gather more data about their limitations and develop appropriate protocols for interaction with such a fragile species. As the meeting concluded and the various representatives filed out, Thane remained behind to study the images of Earth one more time. The humans looked so vulnerable in their protective clothing and enclosed vehicles. He genuinely hoped that first contact would not prove fatal to them. It would be a shame for such an interesting species to be destroyed by exposure to the wider galaxy they were clearly not equipped to handle. The emergency alarm pierced through the quiet hum of the Coalition monitoring station like a blade through silk. Communications Officer Vera bolted upright from her meditation pod, her neural implants immediately syncing with the incoming transmission data. What she saw on her screens made her 3 hearts skip in unison. Commander Thane to the communications center immediately, she broadcast through the ship's internal network, her voice carrying the kind of urgency that made seasoned space veterans abandon whatever they were doing and run. The distress signal was coming from Kepler 439c, a world so hostile that the Coalition had classified it as uninhabitable by any known form of life. The planet orbited twin suns that bombarded its surface with deadly radiation. Its atmosphere was thick with sulfuric compounds that could dissolve most known materials within hours. The surface temperature averaged hot enough to melt lead, and constant volcanic activity made the ground shake like a living thing in permanent agony. "What do we have?" Thane demanded as he burst into the communications center, still fastening his duty vest. "Sir, we're receiving what appears to be a human distress beacon from Kepler 439c, Vera replied, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she tried to clean up the signal. The transmission is badly corrupted by atmospheric interference, but the signature matches Earth technology. Thane felt his stomach drop. 6 months ago, the Coalition had been monitoring a human colony ship called the New Horizon as it traveled toward a potentially habitable system. The ship had been massive by human standards, but primitive by galactic ones, carrying nearly 3,000 people in suspended animation. Then they had lost track of it during a routine hyperspace jump. "How long ago did it crash?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Based on the signal degradation and our records of the New Horizon's last known position, I estimate 18 months ago, sir. 18 months, on a world that could kill most Coalition species in less than 18 minutes. Thane closed his eyes and tried not to imagine the horror those poor humans must have endured. If any had survived the initial crash, they would have died slowly and painfully as their primitive life support systems failed and their fragile bodies succumbed to the hellish environment. "Sir," Vera continued hesitantly, "there's something else. The distress signal isn't asking for immediate evacuation. It's requesting medical supplies and construction materials. That made no sense at all. Dead people didn't request construction." "Materials? Could the signal be automated?" Thane asked. "Perhaps their computers are still functioning even though the crew is gone." "Negative, sir. I'm detecting real-time modulation patterns consistent with active human communication protocols. Someone is actively transmitting this message." Nye stared at the tactical display showing Kepler 439c's orbital position. The planet was a glowing ball of misery that registered red across every survivability index the Coalition had ever developed. The idea that humans could survive there for 18 months was like suggesting that someone could live comfortably inside a plasma furnace. "Prepare a rescue mission," he ordered. "Full environmental protection, emergency medical teams, and body recovery equipment." "Sir, with respect," interrupted Dr. Yilan, who had just arrived in the communications center. "A rescue mission to that world would be extremely dangerous. The radiation levels alone would require Class A hazmat protocols. The atmospheric corrosion would eat through our hull plating within days. Those humans have been trapped in hell for a year and a half," Thane replied firmly. "If there's even the smallest chance that some of them are still alive, we have a moral obligation to try." 3 days later, the Coalition rescue vessel Mercy descended through Kepler 439c's churning atmosphere like a metal angel diving into the mouth of a volcano. The ship's advanced shielding sparked and flared as acids in the air tried to dissolve anything they touched. The temperature readings on Thane's console climbed past the point where most known life forms would simply burst into flames. Approaching. "The crash site," reported Navigator Mills, his voice tight with concentration as he fought to keep the ship stable in the violently turbulent atmosphere. "Sir, I'm reading multiple heat signatures that could be wreckage, but the interference is making detailed scans impossible." "Take us down carefully," Thane ordered. "Remember, we might be looking at survivors who have been struggling to stay alive in impossible conditions for over a year." As the Mercy broke through the lowest cloud layer, the surface of Kepler 439c revealed itself in all its terrifying glory. Rivers of molten rock carved glowing channels across a landscape that looked like someone's nightmare of what hell might actually look like. Geysers of superheated gas erupted randomly from fissures in the ground, creating towers of steam that rose kilometers into the toxic sky. "There," Mills pointed to a clearing near what appeared to be the remains of a massive spacecraft. "I can see wreckage from the New Horizon," but as they approached, something unexpected appeared on their sensors. Thane blinked and looked again, certain that the toxic atmosphere was interfering with their equipment. "Mills, am I reading this correctly? Are those structures near the crash site?" The navigator double-checked his instruments. "Sir, I'm showing what appear to be intentionally constructed buildings. They look like they're made from salvaged ship materials and local rock." "That's impossible," Dr. Yilan whispered from her monitoring station. "No human could have survived long enough to build anything on this world." As they descended further, more impossible details emerged. Gardens of some kind, with plants that couldn't possibly be growing in such conditions. Pathways that had been deliberately cleared and maintained, and most shocking of all, movement. "Commander," Mills said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I'm detecting human life signs, multiple contacts, and sir, some of them appear to be small." "Small how?" "Child-sized, sir." Thane stared at his displays in complete bewilderment. The readings were clear but impossible. Not only were there adult humans alive on this hell world, but there were children. Young ones, based on the size signatures. "This can't be right," he muttered. "Our models show that human children are even more fragile than adults. They would have died first." "Sir?" came Vera's voice from the communications. "Station. I'm receiving a transmission from the surface, audio only, but it's definitely human." "Put it through," Thane ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was clear, cheerful, and absolutely impossible given the circumstances. "Hello up there! Welcome to New Haven Colony. We saw your ship coming down. Are you here to trade? Or do you need help? We've got hot soup and a place to get out of the acid rain if your gear isn't rated for local conditions." Thane looked around the bridge at his crew, all of whom were staring at the speakers as if they had just heard a ghost speak. The voice sounded not just alive, but healthy, even happy. "This is Commander Thane of the Galactic Coalition," he managed to reply. "We received your distress signal. We're here to evacuate survivors." Laughter came through the speakers, warm and genuinely amused. "Distress signal? Oh, that old thing. Sorry about that. We've been meaning to update it. We're not in distress anymore. We've actually been doing pretty well here, but we'd love to meet you. Just be careful landing. The kids have been playing near the landing area, and we don't want anyone to get hurt." Playing. The human said the children were playing, outside, on a world that could melt Coalition military equipment. The airlock hissed open with a sound like escaping steam, and Commander Thane stepped onto the surface of Kepler 439c, wearing every piece of protective equipment the Coalition had ever invented. His environmental suit was rated for vacuum exposure, chemical warfare, and radiation levels that would sterilize most planets. The thick helmet visor automatically darkened to protect his eyes from the twin suns blazing overhead like angry gods. Through his suit's external sensors, he could see the landscape that surrounded the human settlement. Rivers of molten rock flowed past like deadly streams, while geysers of superheated gas erupted randomly from cracks in the ground. The air itself shimmered with heat that would have cooked most life forms in seconds. His suit's computer was displaying so many environmental warnings that he had to turn off the audio alerts to hear anything else. "Stay close to me," he ordered his team through the comm system. Dr. Yilan walked beside him in her own protective gear, while 2 security officers flanked them, their weapons ready though they had no idea what they might need to defend against. The whole scene felt like walking into the mouth of an active volcano while wearing armor made of hope and prayers. That's when he saw the first impossible thing. A human child, no more than 8 years old by his estimate, came running toward them across ground that his sensors registered as hot enough to melt copper. The child was wearing simple clothing that looked like it had been sewn from fabric salvaged from the crashed ship. No environmental suit, no breathing apparatus, no protection at all from the hellish conditions that surrounded them. "Hello there," the child called out, waving enthusiastically. "Are you the visitors Mom said were coming? Your suits look really cool." Thane stopped walking entirely, staring in complete shock. The child was not only alive and unprotected on the surface of this death world, but seemed completely comfortable. The kid's skin had a slightly darker tone than typical humans he had observed, but otherwise looked perfectly healthy. "How?" Thane whispered into his comm system. "Is that child not dead?" "Sir," Dr. Yilan replied, her voice filled with the same bewilderment. "According to my readings, the ambient temperature here is 73 degrees Celsius. The atmospheric composition would be toxic to 90% of known life forms. That child should be unconscious from heat stroke and chemical poisoning. The little human heard their conversation somehow and laughed. Oh, you mean the weather? Yeah, it was pretty rough when we first got here. But you get used to it. Tommy figured out how to breathe the air after just a few weeks. Want me to show you the way to the settlement? Before Thane could respond, more children appeared from various directions. A group of teenagers was walking casually along the bank of what his sensors identified as a river of liquid sulfur heated to temperatures that could melt his boots. They were talking and laughing among themselves, completely ignoring the deadly environment around them. This is impossible, he muttered, but followed the first child as she skipped along a path that led toward the settlement. The buildings were a mixture of salvaged materials from their crashed ship and local stone that had been somehow shaped and fitted together. Thane could see adults moving around the settlement, tending gardens that shouldn't have been able to grow anything, maintaining equipment that should have failed months ago, and generally living their lives as if they were on a pleasant colony world instead of in the closest thing to hell that the galaxy had to offer. "Welcome to New Haven," said a woman who approached them from the largest building. She was middle-aged with graying hair and the kind of confident smile that suggested she was the community leader. What shocked Thane was that she was wearing a simple dress and sandals with no protection from the environment at all. "I'm Dr. Rivers," she continued, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "We're so glad to see you. It's been a while since we've had visitors from off-world." Thane stared at her outstretched hand through his helmet visor. She was standing on ground that would have melted his feet if his protective suit failed, breathing air that would have killed him in minutes, and acting like they were meeting in a pleasant park on a nice day. "Dr. Rivers," he managed to say through his suit's external speakers, "how are you alive?" She laughed, a sound that was somehow both warm and matter-of-fact. "Well, that's a story. The first few months were definitely challenging. We lost some people in the crash, and the environment was tougher than we expected. But humans are pretty adaptable when we have to be." "Adaptable?" Dr. Yelan stepped forward, her scientific mind trying to process what she was observing. "Dr. Rivers, our sensors indicate that this planet's conditions should be lethal to human biology. The temperature alone should cause immediate cellular damage." "Oh, that," Rivers shrugged casually. "Yeah, it took some getting used to. The children adapted faster than the adults, actually. Kids are remarkably flexible when it comes to environmental changes. Would you like to come inside and see what we've built?" As they walked toward the main building, Thane noticed more impossible details. Human children were playing games in areas where volcanic gas vented from the ground. A teenager was casually washing clothes in what appeared to be a hot spring that his sensors registered as being acidic enough to dissolve metal. An elderly man was sitting outside reading a book, apparently unbothered by the fact that the mild afternoon sunshine would have given most species fatal radiation poisoning within minutes. The children seemed particularly well adapted, he observed, watching a group of kids who appeared to be having a swimming race in a pool of water that was literally boiling. "Oh, yes," Rivers replied proudly. "Kids are amazing. They figure things out so quickly. Little Emma over there," she pointed to a 6-year-old who was helping tend a garden of plants that grew in soil hot enough to cook food. "She discovered that if you hold your breath in a certain way, the local atmosphere is actually quite breathable. And Tommy worked out how to regulate his body temperature so the heat doesn't bother him." Thane's mind reeled. What she was describing sounded less like adaptation and more like real-time evolution, which was supposed to be impossible for complex life forms. Inside the main building, he was shocked to discover a thriving community center. Adults and children moved around in comfortable clothing, working on various projects, preparing food, and generally living normal lives. The temperature inside was still hot enough to be dangerous to most species, but the humans seemed completely comfortable. "How long did this adaptation take?" Dr. Yelan asked, her professional curiosity overcoming her shock. "Most of the children were comfortable within the first month," Rivers replied. Adults took a bit longer, maybe 3 to 4 months to fully adjust. We had to figure out new ways of doing things, new techniques for staying healthy in the local conditions. But that's impossible, Thane said. Biological adaptation typically requires thousands of generations. Rivers smiled and walked over to a window that looked out over their settlement. Commander, with respect, you've been studying us from a distance and making assumptions about our limitations. What you're seeing here is what humans actually do when we have to survive. Through the window, Thane could see children playing in conditions that would require his species to wear the most advanced protective equipment ever invented. They were laughing, running, and living their lives as if this Hellworld was just another place to call home. For the first time since arriving, Thane began to wonder if he had completely misunderstood what humans were capable of. Dr. Yilan had set up her portable laboratory in what the humans called their community center, though by her standards it looked more like a gathering place built inside an active furnace. For the past 3 days, she had been conducting the most thorough biological study of her career while trying to understand how an entire human population had not only survived on Kepler 439c, but actually seemed to be thriving. Her equipment hummed quietly as it analyzed blood samples, tissue, scans, and atmospheric readings. Every test she ran seemed to contradict the fundamental principles of biology that she had spent her lifetime studying. The results were so unusual that she had run each test multiple times, certain her instruments were malfunctioning. The cellular structure is completely normal, she murmured to herself, adjusting her protective suit as she worked. Even inside the building, the environmental conditions were harsh enough to require full protection for her species. But that should be impossible. Commander Thane approached her workstation, his own environmental suit making soft, mechanical sounds as it regulated temperature and filtered the air. "What have you found, Doctor?" "Something that shouldn't exist," she replied, pulling up a holographic display of human cellular analysis. "Look at these readings, Commander. These people have undergone biological changes that typically require thousands of years of evolutionary pressure, but they've accomplished it in less than 18 months. The display showed detailed scans of human biology, comparing the current colonists to baseline human data from Earth. Their lung capacity has increased by 30%. Their skin has developed additional layers that provide protection against radiation and heat. Their metabolic processes have completely reorganized to handle the atmospheric composition of this world." Thane studied the data with growing amazement. "How is that possible?" "I don't know," Yilan admitted. "According to everything we understand about biology, it simply cannot happen. But here's what's truly remarkable." She switched to a different set of readings. "The children show even more dramatic adaptations than the adults." A young voice piped up from behind them. "That's because we're better at listening to what the planet wants to teach us." They turned to see Emma, the 6-year-old human child, standing nearby with a cup of what appeared to be steaming liquid. The fact that she was casually holding something hot enough to cause severe burns to most species while standing in an environment that should have killed her instantly no longer surprised them as much as it should have. "What do you mean by that, Emma?" Dr. Yilan asked, activating her suit's translation and recording systems. "Well," the little girl said thoughtfully, taking a sip of her drink. "When we first got here, everything hurt. The air made our throats burn. The ground was too hot for our feet, and the sun made our eyes water. But Mom said we had to figure out how to live here, so we did." She paused to wave at another child who was visible through the window, playing in what Thane's sensors registered as a puddle of mildly corrosive liquid heated to nearly boiling temperature. "The grown-ups kept trying to fight the planet," Emma continued. "They built shelters and wore thick clothes and complained about how hard everything was, but us kids, we just listened to what our bodies wanted to do." "What did your bodies want to do?" Thane asked, genuinely curious. "Like when the air hurt my throat. I tried breathing different ways until I found one that didn't hurt." And when my feet got hot, I walked on them more until they got tougher. Tommy figured out that if you relax instead of being scared, the heat feels nice instead of painful. Dr. Yilan exchanged glances with Commander Thane. What the child was describing sounded like conscious control over evolutionary adaptation, which violated several fundamental laws of biology. "Emma," she said carefully, "can you show us how you learned to breathe the local air?" "Sure," the child replied cheerfully, "but you'll have to take off your helmet first." "That's not possible," Thane said quickly. "The atmosphere would be toxic to our species." "Maybe," Emma shrugged. "But maybe you just haven't learned how to breathe it right yet. We could teach you if you want to learn." Before either adult could respond, Dr. Rivers approached their group. She had been working outside in the settlement's gardens, tending plants that somehow managed to grow in soil that registered as chemically hostile to most known forms of life. "How's the research going?" she asked Dr. Yilan. "Confusing," the scientist replied honestly. "Dr. Rivers, what your people have accomplished here appears to be biologically impossible. The level of adaptation we're observing typically requires genetic changes that take place over thousands of generations." Rivers smiled and wiped her hands on a cloth. "Maybe our understanding of what's possible needs some updating. When the survival of your children depends on adapting quickly, you'd be amazed what the human body can figure out how to do. But the children show the most dramatic changes," Dr. Yilan continued. "Their biology has altered more extensively than the adults. How do you explain that?" "Kids are more flexible," Rivers replied simply. "Adults tend to get stuck in patterns of thinking about what should or shouldn't be possible. Children just focus on what they need to do to be comfortable and healthy." As if to demonstrate her point, a group of teenagers came running past the window, chasing each other through a landscape that looked like the surface of an angry star. They were laughing and shouting to each other, apparently having the time of their lives in conditions that would require emergency evacuation protocols for most coalition species. "Dr. Rivers," Commander Thane said slowly, "are you saying that human children can consciously direct their own biological adaptation?" "I'm saying that when children need to survive, they find ways to survive," she replied. "The specific mechanisms might be interesting to study, but the important thing is that they're healthy and happy." Dr. Yilan looked at her instruments again, then at the human child standing casually in her toxic environment, then back at her readings. "Commander, I need to request additional research time. What we're observing here could revolutionize our understanding of adaptive biology." "Granted," Thane said immediately. "Take all the time you need." Emma finished her hot drink and set the cup down. "If you want to understand how we do it, you should try doing it yourselves instead of just measuring it," she suggested. "The planet is actually pretty nice once you learn how to be friends with it." Through the window, they could see more children, playing outside, their laughter carrying across a landscape that every scientific instrument classified as uninhabitable. Yet there they were, not just surviving, but genuinely enjoying their lives in what should have been a hellish environment. Dr. Yilan realized that everything she thought she knew about the limits of biological adaptation was about to be completely rewritten. The humans hadn't just survived on this world. They had transformed themselves into something new, something that could thrive anywhere, and their children were leading the way. 3 months after first setting foot on Kepler 439c, Commander Thane stood in the Coalition Council chambers without his environmental suit for the first time in years. The transformation had been gradual and impossible, but it had happened, nonetheless. Under the careful guidance of human children who treated biological adaptation like a game they had mastered, he had learned to survive in conditions that should have killed him instantly. The assembled representatives of 12 species stared at him in shock. His skin showed the same subtle changes that marked all long-term residents of the human colony. His breathing had adapted to process atmospheric compositions that would have been toxic months earlier. Most remarkably, he seemed completely comfortable. in the chamber's standard temperature, even though it was set to accommodate the environmental needs of species who required much cooler conditions than humans preferred. Honorable delegates, Thane began, his voice carrying a confidence that came from having witnessed the impossible become routine. I must formally request that we completely revise our assessment of human capabilities and our first contact protocols. The Vorthan delegate clicked her mandibles nervously. Commander, your reports from Kepler 439c have been difficult to accept. Are you certain that your observations are accurate? More than certain, Thane replied, activating the chamber's holographic display system. I have lived among the humans for 3 months. I have observed their children playing in conditions that our best scientists classified as unsurvivable. I have watched families thrive in an environment that would kill most coalition species within minutes. Images filled the air above the assembly table, human children swimming in thermal pools that registered temperatures hot enough to cook most known proteins. Teenagers casually walking through atmospheric conditions that would require hazmat protocols for coalition personnel. Adults tending gardens in soil that previous scientific surveys had classified as completely sterile. What you are seeing is not survival, Thane continued. This is adaptation on a scale that redefines what we thought was biologically possible. The humans have not merely endured on Kepler 439c. They have transformed themselves into something new. Dr. Yelan, who had returned to the coalition several weeks earlier, stood to address the assembly. Delegates, my biological analysis confirms everything Commander Thane has reported. Human children demonstrate the ability to undergo rapid evolutionary changes in response to environmental pressure. What normally takes thousands of generations, they accomplish in months or even weeks. The crystalline Nexari representative pulsed with a worried light pattern. Dr. Yelan, are you suggesting that humans can consciously control their own evolution? The children can, she replied simply. The adults require more time and guidance, but yes, they demonstrate unprecedented adaptive capabilities. They approach environmental challenges not as obstacles to be overcome with technology, but as puzzles to be solved through biological change. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as the implications began to sink in. The Altarian ambassador leaned forward in his chair. If this is accurate, it means humans could potentially colonize any world in the galaxy. Not just colonize, Thane corrected. They could adapt to thrive in environments where our most advanced technology fails. I have seen human children playing games in areas where our military equipment would be destroyed within hours. He switched the display to show footage of the New Haven colony's expansion over the months since first contact. They have built a thriving community on a world we classified as uninhabitable. They have developed new agricultural techniques for growing food in toxic soil. They have learned to use geothermal energy from volcanic vents for power generation. The Keltheran observer raised several arms simultaneously, her species gesture for extreme concern. Commander, if humans can adapt to any environment, what does this mean for the rest of us? Could they potentially outcompete established galactic civilization? That's exactly the wrong question, came a new voice from the chamber's communication system. The assembly turned to see the holographic projection of Dr. Rivers, speaking from the surface of Kepler 439c. Behind her, human children could be seen playing in what appeared to be a shower of liquid metal from a nearby volcanic eruption. Dr. Rivers, Thane said warmly, thank you for joining us. Commander Thane asked me to address your concerns, she continued, her image flickering slightly due to the interference from her world's harsh electromagnetic environment. I understand that our capabilities might seem threatening, but I want to assure you that humans have no interest in conquest or domination. She gestured to the children playing behind her. What you're seeing is simply what humans do when we need to survive and protect our families. We adapt. We find ways to thrive. We make homes wherever we happen to be. The Vorthan delegate spoke up, her voice carrying centuries of diplomatic caution. Dr. Rivers, surely you understand our concern. Your species appears capable of surviving in environments where we cannot even visit safely. This could fundamentally alter the balance of galactic civilization. I think you're missing the point, Rivers replied gently. Humans don't want to take over your worlds. We want to live on, the worlds you can't use, the places that are too hot, too cold, too toxic, or too dangerous for most species. We're not competition for your territory. We're the solution to your waste disposal problems. Behind her, a group of human children had discovered something in the volcanic field and were excitedly calling others over to see. What looked like deadly terrain to the coalition representatives was apparently an endless playground for human young. Furthermore, Rivers continued, our children have been asking questions about other worlds and other species. They're excited about the possibility of making friends with people who are different from them. Emma has been particularly interested in meeting crystalline life forms like the Nexari. She thinks it would be fascinating to learn how beings made of living crystal experience the world. The Nexari representative pulsed with surprised patterns. A human child wants to meet us? All of our children do. Rivers smiled. They see the galaxy as a place full of potential friends and teachers, not threats to be feared or territories to be conquered. Commander Thane stepped forward. Delegates, I have spent months living among humans, and Dr. Rivers speaks the truth. Their children approach everything with curiosity and friendship. When they learned that I came from a species that required different environmental conditions, they immediately began trying to figure out ways to make me more comfortable. It was actually the children who taught me how to adapt to their world, he continued. They treated it like teaching a friend how to play a new game. There was no sense of superiority or competition, just genuine desire to help. Dr. Yilan nodded in agreement. The human approach to adaptation appears to be fundamentally cooperative rather than competitive. They adapt themselves to fit their environment rather than trying to force their environment to change for them. What does this mean for coalition policy? Asked the Altarian ambassador. It means we need to completely revise our understanding of what's possible, Thane replied. Humans don't need our protection from harsh environments. They don't need extensive terraforming projects or environmental controls. What they offer us is the ability to establish colonies and outposts in places we never thought possible. The holographic display shifted to show star charts of the galaxy with numerous systems highlighted in red. These are systems we've classified as completely uninhabitable, Thane explained. Worlds too close to their stars, planets with toxic atmospheres, moons with crushing gravity or deadly radiation. With human partners, every one of these systems becomes potentially useful. They could establish research stations on worlds where we can't even land safely, Dr. Yilan added. They could harvest resources from environments that would destroy our equipment. They could serve as early warning systems for cosmic threats that develop in hostile regions of space. Dr. Rivers' projection smiled warmly. We would be honored to help. Our children are already asking if they can visit other dangerous worlds to see what they might learn there. They think of it as the ultimate adventure. Behind her, as if summoned by her words, Emma appeared in the projection. The 6-year-old waved enthusiastically at the assembled delegates. Hello, everyone! Are you the friends from the other worlds? We've been hoping you would visit. The chamber fell silent as the various species contemplated the implications. Here was a child who lived casually in conditions that would require their most advanced protective technology, treating the prospect of meeting alien species with the same excitement that other children might show for a new toy. The question before us, said the Keltharan observer slowly, is whether we are prepared to welcome a species that might fundamentally change what we think of as possible. I think, said the Nexari representative, his crystalline form pulsing with thoughtful colors. The question is whether we are brave enough to learn from them. Commander Thane looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. The humans call their settlement New Haven. They chose that name because they believe they can make a home anywhere, no matter how hostile it might seem. They're offering to be our partners in exploring and utilizing the parts of the galaxy that we've written off as impossible. And their children, he added with a smile, are already planning the welcoming party for when we're ready to visit worlds we never thought we could survive on. Emma waved again from the projection. We're making lots of room for visitors. Tommy found some really cool caves that stay nice and cool if any of you need lower temperatures. And the thermal pools are great if you like it warmer. The galaxy, Thane realized, was about to become a much larger and more interesting place. And it would be human children leading the way into environments that had seemed impossible just months before. The age of human expansion was about to begin, not through conquest or colonization, but through adaptation and friendship. The children of New Haven were already dreaming of all the impossible places they could learn to call home.